Have you ever stopped to wonder if the way we usually see world politics, as this big chess match between countries, might be missing the real story? What if the things that truly drive war, peace, and power are actually hidden just beneath the surface, running on a logic we don't always see? Let's dig into that.
I mean, really, is it presidents and prime ministers? Is it big international organizations like the UN? Or is it something else entirely? Something, well, more fundamental? Turns out, there's a whole school of thought in international relations that gives a pretty provocative answer to that question.
And yeah, that answer comes from ideas rooted in the work of Karl Marx. Now, Marx himself didn't write a complete A to Z guide on international relations, but his ideas, they give us a really powerful and definitely alternative lens for understanding why the world works the way it does. So today, we're going to build that worldview piece by piece.
To really get our heads around the Marxist approach to global politics, we have to start at the very bottom. I mean, the absolute foundation that everything else is built on. And for Marx, that foundation is all about one thing: economics.
This is the absolute core concept. It's called historical materialism. And the idea is pretty straightforward, actually. The way a society produces and organizes all its stuff, the economic base, that's what fundamentally determines everything else. The government, the laws, the culture, even the big ideas floating around. All of that is called the superstructure.
And you can see right here how that chain of events is supposed to work. It all starts with the basic stuff, the technology, the resources a society has. That then shapes who owns things and who works for whom. The class system. Those two things together, that's your economic base. And it's only on top of that base that you get the political superstructure of laws and government. The key is that the base shapes the superstructure, not the other way around.
This quote from Marx himself just nails the whole idea. He argued that our material reality, our social being, whether we're a worker or an owner, is what shapes our ideas, our beliefs, our very consciousness. We don't just invent our political systems out of thin air. They grow directly out of the economic soil of our society.
Okay, so if the economy is the foundation, where does the state fit in? What's the role of government, of law, of the police in this whole model? Let's add the next layer to this thing and see how it builds.
So the view many of us probably grew up with is that the state is this neutral referee, right? It's there to balance everyone's needs. But the Marxist perspective? It offers a totally different take. It sees the state not as a referee, but as a tool, an instrument, used by whatever economic class is dominant to protect its own power and its own interests.
And according to this theory, this isn't some new development. You can look at history as this series of stages, and in each one, the state changes its form to serve the ruling class of that era. In a slave society, its job is to protect slave owners. In a feudal society, it protects the landed aristocracy. And in a capitalist society, it's there to protect the owners of capital, the bourgeoisie.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The crucial point is that this control isn't just about physical force. The argument is that because the dominant class controls the money and the resources, it also ends up controlling the production of ideas, shaping media, education, the whole culture. In this view, economic power pretty much translates directly into ideological power. Now, this whole system of class and state power, it doesn't just stay put inside a country's borders. It has this built-in need to expand. And later thinkers, like Vladimir Lenin, built on Marx's work to explain exactly how and why that happens.
Lenin called this imperialism. And he didn't see it as just, an act of conquest. He saw it as an inevitable economic stage of capitalism. He argued that as capitalism matures, going global isn't really a choice. It's something it absolutely has to do to survive. And why is it a necessity? Well, because capitalism is always constantly looking for new markets to sell its products, new sources of cheap raw materials to make those products, and new places to invest its money to get higher profits. And as huge monopolies start to form in the richer countries, they get pushed into this fierce global competition for all of those things.
And this takes us to a really radical conclusion about why countries go to war. From this point of view, major conflicts, think about the world wars, they're not just fought over flags or politics or national pride. They're seen as the logical and tragic result of this relentless economic competition between powerful capitalist countries.
But, power isn't always about brute force, about guns and armies. The most effective kind of control is when people agree to be ruled without even realizing it. And that brings us to our final, and maybe the most subtle, piece of this theory. The Italian thinker Antonio Gramsci made this really important distinction. On one hand, you have rule by force, domination. That's obvious, right? It's coercion.
But a much, much more powerful form of control is what he called hegemony, which is basically rule by consent. This happens when you shape a society's ideas and its culture so that the way things are just seems, well, natural, legitimate, and in everyone's best interest.
To put it really simply, hegemony is what you get when the ideas of the people in power become the unspoken common sense for everybody else. It's that moment when we all just kind of accept the status quo, the way things are right now, as the only way things could possibly be. That's hegemony. And it's the best kind of power because it doesn't even feel like power at all.
So how does this actually apply to world politics? Well, neo-Marxist scholars would argue that after World War II, the U.S. didn't just rule through military might. It established global hegemony by creating a whole economic system through institutions like the IMF and the World Bank that promoted its free market principles, basically making its own worldview the global common sense.
All right, so we've laid down the economic foundation, we've ideated the state, we've watched it expand across the globe, and we've refined it with the power of ideas. Let's pull all these threads together now.
So in a nutshell, the Marxist lens shows us a world where economics is king. The economic system creates the class structure, the state pops up to defend that structure, and the whole system is driven to expand globally, fighting its rivals and locking down its power not just with force, but by shaping what all of us believe to be true and normal.
It is a challenging, for sure, and a very provocative way to look at the world. And it leaves us with one last big question to think about. When we look around at our modern world, a world of global brands, tech giants, and digital markets, how much of this framework, something born 150 years ago, still helps explain who really runs things today?